Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidtless Live. I am your host, Kurt Schmidt, president and partner at Foundry, and I am so excited for today's show because we have Cale, one of my good friends, who's going to talk to us about the major success he's recently had, and he's going to give us some advice on what to be thinking about when we're building our businesses and things that we should be thinking about if somebody wants our businesses to join their businesses and make little businesses. Well, that's a whole different thing. Okay, but before I jump in, I do have to mention that we are hiring. Check out foundrymakes.com. We are hiring over there. You can go to the thing up here and check it out. And we're looking for people. We're expanding the office. Lots of people are starting to come back. It's crazy. It's a little bit of a party. We're having to figure out how much LaCroix is needed. How much pool time is available at the pool table. It's a whole thing, but we're working on it. It's going to be a little bit of a transition. But let me stop chattering and talk to my friend Cale. Cale, how are you today? It is good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm good. How are you?
Oh, living the dream, man. Living the dream. I am so excited to talk to you. You and I have been friends for a while, and you've got this company, ClickSWITCH, which, as from a little boy, you were hoping someday to change the way the banking industry worked when it came to switching accounts. You dreamed about it as a kid, I'm sure. Drew stories in crayons and all those things, right? How did ClickSWITCH come about? How did the whole idea appear to you?
So I started the company in 2014, and before I started ClickSWITCH, I was at another startup here in Minneapolis, and we were doing mobile deposit capture. So take a picture of your check, an app on your phone or within your mobile banking, and you can deposit your check remotely by snapping a picture. The idea came when I was working at that company, and I was meeting with all these banks, and the banks were like, this technology is really cool, but I can't get customers actually switched over to use the technology that I'm buying for them. Mm-hmm. Recognize that there was a fundamental issue when it came to onboarding new customers. So you open up a checking account. What do you do next? How do you get a primary account holder? How do you get a profitable account holder? And really recognized it was around getting that direct deposit switched over and getting the recurring payments switched over. So ClickSWITCH is an enablement tool that helps the customer switch over their direct deposit. So the next time they get paid, it goes into their new checking account. And it also sets up their recurring payments switches it from their old account over to their new account. So your energy bill, your mortgage, your auto loan, all those kind of auto pays that you have set up are now automatically set up within your new account. And then, our ROI, our business model to the bank was we're delivering you a profitable and primary checking account. And it just became a huge need over the years. Like I said, in 2014, we came out of nowhere. Nobody was doing it. We had no competition. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, there was a lot of competition going on with banking, with community banks and credit unions. They've always been competing against each other. And then tier ones come into the space and they want that market. And then there was the rise of challenger banks. When you look at like Chime and Acorns and Moneyline, they were all going after that same customer as well. So, right. Our product, while it was a good idea, we really had to evolve really quickly because there became a lot of competition to get a primary account holder, and banks viewed, our tool as that leg up in the industry.
Yeah. Did you feel like once it started, like you said, it seemed like there was sort of a general malaise in the banking industry where like, well, this isn't a problem to be solved. Was it a lot of education on your part in the beginning where you were like, having to go in and be like, no, look, like this is a problem we can solve. And they were, how did those initial conversations go? Because like you said, you already knew what the problem statement was. So obviously you're probably walking in and saying, I bet you would like an easy way to onboard new people. But, since they weren't exploring the technology, I mean, how did that education process go for you?
It was a big learning curve right away. And, as you're probably familiar with, a lot of these companies are getting spun up because they're taking paper-based processes and they're digitizing them. And that's exactly what we did in the beginning was, how banks were switching over customers. They had these paper change request forms or paper switch kits, they would call them.
Sure.
And it would enter your account number, routing number, who pays you, you hand it back to your bank. And it's kind of just a guide. And I saw that paper switch kit and I was like, we just need to digitize this. And so version 1.0 of ClickSWITCH was we just digitized a paper switch kit. Mm-hmm. And then it just, the ball starts rolling a little bit. You start adding new features of functionality and new automation. And now you have, looking at it today, it's basically, enter your ADP username and password and hit submit. And then we can go in and update your direct deposit information. So back in the day, we were using kind of these rails of taking paper-based processes and digitizing them, make it look automated. But there was a lot of back-end work that was going on from a staffing perspective to make sure we could fulfill these switches in real time. Because sometimes, if you work at UPS, we have to send a paper change request form on UPS letterhead and a voided check to a PO box in Omaha. And you look at these digital banks that are, these neobanks that are, starting up, they don't even issue checks. So how are you going to get your direct deposit switched over if you don't even have a checkbook when your employer requires a check? So we had a business because we were completing just a fundamental step that the end user just couldn't do because technology was ahead of how people and processes were handling things on the back end.
Right. Well, then how did you first enter into those banks? Because somebody had to be the guinea pig, right? Like somebody had to be like, okay, sure. And, I can imagine, especially when you started ClickSWITCH, I mean, those systems were pretty archaic as it is. And now you were going to introduce this new digitized system. Just walk me through that first day where they're starting to use this thing. How was that for you? I can imagine the anxiety was high.
It was high. You quit your job and you set up a second mortgage and you believe in something, and then you build a demo site and you take it to banks, and the feedback was really good right away, and we signed a couple contracts, but it's hard to test live in FinTech without actually submitting real stuff.
Right.
So we couldn't really test if this was going to work or not. We could make it look real cool and say, all right, this is the new user flow. But as soon as somebody hits submit on a switch, what happens?
Right.
And I remember the first switch comes in and it's like, we have a switch. Somebody's switching their direct deposit from ABC over to XYZ. And it's like, all right, what do we do now? And there is some of that moment, like, okay, I hope the switch goes through. I hope it's a good user experience. I hope it's all that. But, when you come out of nowhere, there is a lot of like, okay, but does it work? You're telling me how it works, but does it work?
Does it actually?
So you need a lot of proof points, a lot of tracking along the way. Okay, if you don't use us, you're at 10% direct deposit capture rate. Here's a case study from Notre Dame Federal Credit Union that they're now at a 95% capture rate of direct deposit. We've lifted their direct deposits over 500% over the last 12 months.
Yep.
So you have to kind of capture that data along the way to create these proof points. But as you alluded to, it takes a lot of people on your side to begin with that says like, what we're doing now isn't working. Even if yours doesn't work, we got to try it. Yeah. And a lot of banks where that was their mentality, like we need to try something different because what we're doing now, it's fundamentally
working, yeah.
And Chase is down the street offering $500 if you set up your direct deposit into their account. How are you going to compete with that?
Right.
So a lot of it was good timing for us because you had the big banks coming out and they're offering rewards, they're offering money to set up a direct deposit.
Yep.
And the smaller banks just couldn't offer that. So they needed to compete, and they felt like they needed to compete with an automated, more seamless way to capture that customer.
Yeah, and that's a piece of advice. I think to your point about if people are interested in the FinTech industry, I think to your point, I mean, there is a point where it's all fun and games until you're dealing with actual people's money. And, you know, I mean, is that, like you were saying, it was really hard to prove, you know, that this thing would work until you were actually playing around with real money. I mean, what would be your advice to someone that's entering that space? They come up with a solution and they're ready to try and implement it. Is it just use your own credit card and see if it works, or what would be your advice?
You know, have good attorneys would be one. Make sure your T&Cs are good.
Have a long terms and conditions thing for people to sign.
Yeah. Make sure all that's pretty solid.
Yeah.
You know, we really wanted to position our company as a facilitator, not a money movement company. So we are facilitating the switch. We are going to do our job. We're going to follow the processes and guidelines that we set up to, you know, get this switched over. But if your employer rejects this switch for whatever reason, you know, we are not moving the money. We are facilitating this initiation of your direct deposit. Now, what we do is we'll check back in, like if we can see that you get paid on the 15th and 30th, and you submitted your switch on the 16th, we'll touch base with the end user on the 30th. It says, hooray, you should have got paid today. Should have went into your new account. If it didn't go here, let us know, to kind of get that feedback, and then say, all right, we'll track this down. We'll resubmit it for you. You know, set up those guidelines along the way. And, you know, from a user perspective, you know, we kind of use the Domino's pizza tracker. You know, when you're switching your bank account, it's a complicated thing. You want to make it look not complicated at all. Step 1, 2, 3, 3 steps, your bank account is switched. And if you just don't provide those guidelines, they may be 90% done, but maybe they think, I got another 75% left to do. I don't have 10% left to do. So we saw a lot of abandoned switches in the beginning because we wouldn't educate the end user where they're at in the life cycle of their journey of getting switched, or where their direct deposit's at, or, okay, I submitted this, what happens? So we just had to err on the side of communicating, setting up alerts, all of that stuff. The end user appreciates that. Yeah, it can be annoying, but we were a one-trick pony, right? We were, come in, we're going to get you switched, then we're out of your life until you switch your bank account again. We're not going to keep bothering you. So that's one of the advice that we had, because we just saw so many abandoned switches or abandoned users that thought they were almost done. Then you provide them another step. So you really got to guide them through exactly what step 1 to how step 3, and it's got to take 5 minutes or else they're going to leave.
Yeah, and there was, and so we've talked a bit about the people making the decisions and the end consumer, but then there's those people in the middle who have always done it the way they've done it before. How was that onboarding process for you? What role did you play in that versus what role did the financial institution play in that? Did they just come in and say, here's a new thing, folks, learn it or whatever? Or did you have to come in and build programs to onboard people? How did that? What was your responsibility in those things? And because I think that's important for founders to think about, you know, how they're coming in, even though the big decision maker is saying, yep, we'll buy your thing. But if it never gets actually implemented or used, then
No, and I'm glad you brought that up, because this is where a lot of companies fail, right? People are buying your stuff, and then you look and you have 0 users, and you're like, what happened? People were buying my stuff, and the president of the bank signs off on it, and now they're only running 2 or 3 switches a month. Like, what happened? Implementations, education, and training are the 3 most critical things to be successful within an organization. You can sell it. You may have really good salespeople that are out there, they're passionate about your product, they're getting people to put pen to paper, you're getting a good contract. But if nobody's using your product, what's the point of it? They're just going to cancel. You're going to have high churn, and it's going to be a problem for your business. And that was something we had to recognize right away. And we had to put more resources behind implementing these financial institutions. Financial institutions, what's happening right now is you have so many FinTechs out there. They're all selling to them. Everybody's selling to a bank and to a credit union right now. And these banks and credit unions are kind of biting off more than they can chew, because they're signing more contracts than ever. They sign a contract, then they go off to their next project, and then somebody else calls them the next day and they say, oh, that's pretty cool, I'm going to sign that contract as well. You can't allow your product to just get absorbed, or else you just aren't going to be successful. So how do you keep engaging through that implementation? How do you make it fun? You know, we offer just constant training sessions throughout the day, because you have high turnover as well.
Sure.
You know, COVID, there was a lot of branches that closed, And now they're reopening, and it's all new staff members we have to retrain into ClickSWITCH. And how can we do that in a feasible way that is not just resource constraint? So we just offer live training sessions throughout the day that banks can hop on, get familiar with the product. But that is one of the most fundamental things where we thought right away, oh my, if you would have told me I signed Citibank in 2017, I would have thought I'd be on an island by now, just with the Citibank account as well. But Citibank has like 5,000 branches. How are you going to train 5,000 branches on how to use your product? So you have to be constantly reinventing yourself, constantly thinking how you can reach everybody and get them as passionate about your product as you are about your product.
And it makes sense, yeah, because I think, to your point, this is where a lot of places fall down because you build what you assume is a product company, and the service side of it seems to be a lagging indicator in a way, right? Where you're not as, it should be a white glove sort of experience for these folks to get into your service. And I think a lot of people focus on the technology and that sort of stuff, but the experience that you're building with these folks, do you think that that's been the stickiness for what you've done?
I think so. There's different business models out there. Maybe you're a B2C, right? And if you're B2C, you got to spend a lot of money. Every consumer needs to know about you. Everybody needs to know you exist. And then you have B2B businesses where you're just selling business services to a business. We were different where we were B2B2C. Like we could sell our services to the bank, but the bank's not going to offer it to the customer. You got a big problem, and you kind of lose your baby a little bit during this sales cycle. Because you might take it and say, "We're better marketers than you, ClickSWITCH. Just sit back, and we're going to run with it from here." And our account managers can't get a hold of them, and it's kind of like, "All right, you're only at 10 or 15 users a month, and you're $1 billion bank. What do we got to do to make a change here?" So you got to recognize what's your identity, what's worked for $1 billion bank in the past, come in and say, this is what worked for your competitor, or this is what worked for your peer, and this is how we're going to implement you. Or maybe you're a $100 million credit union and you open 10 checking or 15 checking accounts a month. Here's what your peers did, and they're now opening 25 checking accounts a month. Yep. So you got to be able to provide those guidelines. It's really hard in the beginning because people are just like, let me take it and run with it. But you lose your identity, and you're in jeopardy of losing your client at the same time because you're setting them up for failure.
Well, let's talk about the business model, because there's a number of different ways to go about this with ClickSWITCH, right? You could sell the platform and sell it outright. You could sell the licensing to it. You could get paid per account switch. You could there's so many different ways to do it. What was that decision process for you? Or was it really clear from the beginning on this is going to be the best, not only for us, but for the end client too? Was it really apparent at the beginning, or did you try a number of things?
We tried a number of things. In the beginning, we charged a setup fee that was minimal. It was like $5 or $10 to get set up. It covers your implementation training. And then once you go live, there's a small monthly minimum that covers like your service, your uptime, all that stuff. Maybe it's $250, maybe it's $500 a month. Mm-hmm. And then after a certain amount of users, it rolls to a per user fee. Mm-hmm. We had some people that came in and said, I'm not going to sign a 3-year contract with you for $500 a month. You're a brand new company. What I will do is I'll sign your contract, and if somebody uses it, I'll pay you the transaction fee. Now, what are you going to do? You're going to take the client, or you're going to say, no, we took a lot of
no, I don't want your money.
Yeah, we took a lot of those clients. And then we would kind of have a conversation like, all right, we want you to be a good reference for us. We want you to, we'll do this for you, but if you could be a reference for us to help us get, further along, we'd appreciate that. As we go, the deals get a little bigger. Mm-hmm. Maybe you walk into a larger financial institution and they open 500,000 checking accounts a month, and they say, we think we're going to have 200,000 users use this in a year. We want to pre-buy users at a discounted rate, but we'll write you a check for $2 million right now.
Sure.
Well, that's a good model when you're bootstrapped because you need the cash to grow. But when an outsource, when a venture capital is looking at you, or maybe you're somebody wants to acquire you, they look at it as risk because it's just deferred revenue that's sitting on your books until we actually recognize that revenue. So that was like model number 2, where it's like, all right, we got to get rid of selling users in bulk because it's just too much liability, too much deferred revenue. What we essentially, landed on was more of a subscription fee with a minimum and a user on top of that, because as we got older, we could go back and ask for a little bit more. We started working with bigger banks. Some of them are $50,000 to $100,000 a month as a minimum, and then it hits a threshold of a per user fee on top of that. So
okay.
You got to kind of play ball with your clients in the beginning, get them. If you don't get what you want, make sure you still provide them with, the best service possible. Say, I want you to be a reference for us, because all of that will pay dividends in the long run, because they're going to say, all right, you took care of me. I'll do a reference call for you, and maybe you can go and get that $20,000 a month minimum that you were looking for, because somebody's saying a lot of good things about you.
That's smart. Yeah. And, with that, you're building a team. You're not just building a product, but you're building a team. And one of the things that I think you've done really well over the years is you've built a great sales machine, a great marketing machine. And so how do you hire salespeople when they're selling something that's never been sold before? Do you look for people that have very much experience in the technical space because it is a technical solution? Or are you looking for people that know banks in and out and understand the problem and can walk in and be like, I know what to do, blah, blah, blah. How do you fall on that? And what would be your advice to founders out there that were sort of building their sales and marketing team? Should they be really focused on the industry or really focused on the innovation side of it?
I think you got to evolve, and as a founder, you got to go where the business needs you. Like right away, the business needed me in sales. Like if the business is going to fail, it's going to fail because we couldn't sell the product, right?
Okay.
And so I wanted to get out there. I wanted to demo every single product. I was doing all the demos from a small client up to a big client. And when we started to hire salespeople, they would sit in on every single one of my demos. And then eventually, when it's time to pass the baton, before I let them on, I was like, you're going to demo for me. And then it's like, okay, that was shit again. And so you make them go through a process, and then finally, they're comfortable. They get out in front of the client, they start selling. And, over the last, I think 2014, 15, 16, I was on all the sales calls. And then 17, 18, 19, I wasn't really much involved in sales unless it got to a big client and it's like it needs, a little advancement to get it closed. But there's a lot of trust that you have with your salespeople. But, none of our salespeople were technical by any means. They didn't come in with technical experience. Now, as we evolved, we kind of have to put a sales engineer on calls.
Sure.
If you're on with Wells Fargo, and they have a highly, and the audience is technical, you're going to want a sales engineer on there to help and assist with that.
Okay.
But most of those calls, if you're selling into a smaller bank, from my perspective, it's more product focused, it's retail, they're just looking to grow, and it just required a sales mentality, I guess, to get it done. A lot of it with banks is around negotiation. How maybe you come out of nowhere, and how are you going to fit into their P&L? How are you going to create an ROI model for them? How are you going to, create the basis? All this stuff to make it look like it's a no-brainer to sign. That's really what, our sales folks were tasked with.
So in the marketing side, how did that work for you to get those meetings? So a lot of people that I know that have platforms and software right now, they're struggling with the ideas of how do I get attention and get those meetings. Was it, did you have a specific way that worked right out the gate? Was that also a process that evolved over time? Where would you give advice to people on how to get those demos, how to get those opportunities, how to get those chances at bat? What would be your advice to folks?
Well, I was lucky because I came from selling into banks and credit unions, so I knew a lot of people, and they trusted me right out of the gate. But really, from a biz dev perspective, I had a red book that had every single bank and credit union in the United States in it, and their top 4 or 5 executives at that bank, and I just went from A to Z, and I would just call that red book all day and try and schedule demos with people. Now, that's not probably the most elegant way to go about it, but when you're scrapping, And now again, that was 2013, 2014. Fast forward, there's LinkedIn, there's a lot more resources right at you. You can direct mail. Maybe it is like, okay, it's right time, right place. But a lot of our growth came from conferences and came from, okay, we just signed a bank down in Florida. How do we provide that bank with marketing credits so they can put out radio ads or a billboard that says, I'm the easiest bank to switch to in Florida? Because what's happening is your competitor down the street's driving to work, their CEO's driving to work, they see this billboard that says, there's another bank that's easier to switch to. Why don't I have this? They walk in. It kind of led to, so we tried to spend a little bit of money and marketing dollars to provide our clients with radio ads, with billboards, so the product really gets out there.
Create some FOMO, right?
Exactly. There was FOMO happening, and then they would go to our website, they would schedule a demo. We drove a lot of organic leads that way. Most of our leads ended up being organic, and I'm happy it was like that because a lot of people struggled in 2020 because they couldn't get to conferences. Nobody knew they existed. How are you going to do outreach? How are you going to do all that? We started utilizing HubSpot a lot more, pushing out bigger marketing campaigns, advertising campaigns, setting up just large demos so people could jump on and, maybe, scheduling is always an issue right now. But, how can we grab somebody's attention for 30 minutes to a large group? Sometimes there was 100, 200, 300 people in just a live webinar that could jump on and see our product, and then it would lead to a sales cycle. So there is better outreach, better marketing tools now than getting a red book and dialing for dollars. And they are cost effective. HubSpot's pretty cost effective, and it reaches a large audience.
That's smart. Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about the last year. And so was it you've been, ClickSWITCH has been a big part of your life for a long time. Were you like, man, I cannot wait to get out of this? Or did you trip and fall into these discussions for acquisition? I mean, I'm sure people had brought it up over the years, right? But obviously this one was different than the others.
Yeah, so you do have those days where you're ready to sell your company for sure. But I think when it actually happens, it's a weird experience. And I'm sitting here, almost 2 months after, and you still wonder a little bit, did I make the right decision? And you got to accept the decision, you got to go with it. But yeah, we were acquired on April 1st of 2021, and how that kind of came about is in late November, there was a company that provided us an unsolicited offer. They were a reseller company of ClickSWITCH, and they looked at it. They started selling a lot of units of our product, and they said, "How do we make this all mine? We want to acquire you. Here's a term sheet. We think valuation's in line." I called the board and said, "Hey, we just got an unsolicited offer." I didn't have bankers involved. It wasn't like I was out seeking anything. But it was a compelling offer, and it made the board say, this kind of works from a way of where our investment's at from a valuation standpoint to where the offer's at.
Okay.
But we think you can get a better deal. So
checking
we're going to make
all the boxes so far.
Yeah. So they picked up the phone and made some phone calls. One of them was to Q2, who ended up, we essentially went with, and they acquired us. Now the interesting thing about Q2 is they were going to acquire us 3 years ago. And so Matt Flake, their CEO, Will Fuhrer, who's their chief strategy officer, I knew all of them because
you had relationships with these folks for a while.
Yeah. So we had a term sheet in 2017. They were going to acquire ClickSWITCH. I was set with it. I was at peace with it. We were like 30 days from closing, and the deal fell apart for whatever reason. Now, I'm glad I didn't burn that bridge because, when it came back to it, they're still there. They still want your company, and they wanted to track our growth, and they were really impressed with our growth and in the feedback that we got throughout that process. And the feedback that we got throughout that process really catapulted us to the next level, because in 2017, they looked at our business and said, you got to get rid of this bulk pricing. You got to get rid of this. You got to get, you got to focus on your gross margins and this, and you be able to track that better. Yeah. And we took all that feedback and we tried to make a better business out of it. And so they're a public company. They know exactly what they want. And we tried to build our business from 2017 to 2021 off of kind of that feedback. And when they looked at us again in December of 2020, they were really impressed with our growth, and they submitted a term sheet that was just a better deal for us and for our employees. And their team and culture is so great at the same time. You really got to look at it. It's not just the money, but you have 60 employees that you got to take care of at the
Right.
same time.
Is this a good cultural fit too? Right. Do they
Exactly.
have similar values? Right.
Exactly. And you look at our mission statements, it's very similar to what Q2's mission is, to what ClickSWITCH's mission is. And, Q2, they sell to FinTechs, they sell to community banks and credit unions, they sell to tier ones. ClickSWITCH sells to FinTechs, community banks, credit unions, and tier ones. So we were totally aligned from a mission standpoint, from a culture standpoint, and who we were going to be providing products and service to. So it ended up being the best fit for the company. But that thing got signed in late December, early January. We were working through the holidays, and then we don't close till April 1st. So you can imagine there's a lot of things that still get packed in over that first quarter. And there's a number of days where you think the deal's falling apart, right? Yep. And you got to be able to handle it well, and you got to be able to have those difficult conversations, because when you're not using a bank, if you're using a banker, the banker can have that difficult conversation with their corp dev person or whoever. Sure. When it's you negotiating the deal and looking out for your employees, and then knowing at the same time you're going to have to go work for this company. There's a delicate dance that has to be done. And we were able to put it together, and I'm really happy it got done.
So what, during that doldrums time, I'm going to call it, right, from the time when you first get the unsolicited offer to right up until, actual, contracts are signed, what's your advice for founders on the mindset that they should have? Like you said, like the deal could fall through at any time. Should I just be focusing on like, I'm going to be doing this for the next 5 years and focus on that, and then take those meetings as they come? What advice would you give someone that's kind of in that sort of mix? What should they be focused on?
Keep running your business how you'd run your business. That's the biggest thing that I can say. And I know that sounds simple, but you get distracted along the way. It's a very distracting process of, it's not just legal matters. You're sitting down with their business development team. You're sitting down with their executive team. You're sitting down with their compliance team, all these different teams that these big companies have. And it's a time suck for you. You're investing a lot of your time with it, and you start to have to pull in more and more team members along the way. And so that's the other thing, is you don't want this to get out to your entire organization, because people are going to have a lot of questions, and you don't know how to answer those questions.
Right. What's going to happen to my job?
Exactly. What's going to happen to you? I don't know what's going to happen to you, because they haven't told me yet. Right. So you got to there's a close circle of people that you can talk to and know what's going on, but you got to keep that circle tight, because if it gets out, you're going to have people jumping ship because they just don't know.
Right. Yep.
What's in it for them? Are they part of it? And you can't answer that. So a lot of the calls we did with Q2, they are from like 5:30 to 7 p.m. at night. Try not to disrupt their day. They were invested in it from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at night, or 7:30 p.m. at night. They wanted us to run our day to day, but it's exhausting along the way, and it gets exhausting for them too. Yeah. But you got to keep that circle tight. You got to continue to operate the business like the deal might not go through, because if you would have done a deal a certain way, and that you're changing hands on April 1st, and they might not like that deal, well, they haven't bought you yet.
Right. Nobody's signed anything yet.
Yeah. So still go out, do the deals that you're comfortable with, do the deals that your business that your business needs, and if the deal falls through, you could still go out and act like it wasn't that big of an impact to you.
Makes sense. So there's the one thing where and I equate it to to home buying, where the homeowner always thinks the house is worth more than what the buyer or the retailer. I mean, not in today's market. Right now, it's ridiculous. But when they came in with that offer and everybody was like, no, it should be more. Were you immediately like, yes? Or, did you have a good sense of what the company was worth? And what would be your advice, maybe to a founder? Are there things that a founder should be doing to be prepared for these sorts of things? Like you said, you can't be prepared for something that just falls out of thin air. Right. But is there things that could be that people should be shoring up, making sure they have their ducks in a row? Because these things do sometimes just drop out of thin air. I know I asked a lot there, but I apologize. But it's kind of like, should I always know what my price is Should I always have all my financial ducks in order, or should I just not worry about that stuff until I have to worry about that stuff?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because the first deal, the first term sheet we got from the company we didn't go with, it was purely a financial deal. Okay, so they looked at our revenue, they were public, and they wanted to buy us for less times revenue multiples than what they were trading at. So immediately it made sense to the street, it made sense to everybody. It was purely numbers. We didn't even get into the product, and we didn't really get into, our sales cycles or anything like that. They looked at our revenue and they gave us a number off of our revenue.
They're just looking at spreadsheets, basically.
Exactly.
Yep.
With Q2, yeah, they have to look at the revenue and the multiple and make sure it works for them. But how does the product integrate? Show me all the inner workings of your product. Show me, all your marketing, all your sales, client testimonials. We're doing client reference calls. We're doing they dug in outside of just revenue, and personalities meshed really well, and I think we just generally liked each other, and it just had a higher probability of closing. Now you do get into the revenue multiple has to make sense.
Yeah, of course.
It's not like if you're Facebook buying Instagram for $1 billion, whatever, but when you're a publicly traded company buying a smaller FinTech company, you got to make sure that revenue multiple works, and you got to make sure it's forecasted correctly, because they have to go to the street on their next earnings call and say, this is going to add X amount of revenue in the second quarter and for the year.
They have to be right.
Those forecasts are accurate, and they're stress testing that model every single day. So that was the biggest kind of education I got throughout it. Is every single day they would see if we're on plan or not. They would look at our number of users. They would look at revenue correlated to that, and they would make sure that we're tracking exactly how we had it modeled. And it's stressful, because if you're off a week, it's like,
sounds like a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
Like you've been your own boss for all these years, and all of a sudden.
And the deal takes longer and longer and longer. At first we wanted to close, end of February, then it was mid-March, then it was April 1st. And it's kind of strategic at the same time, because they want to kind of figure this out to figure out, are you going to hit plan or not? And if you aren't hitting plan, we're going to pull the plug.
Yep.
So it is that kind of cat and mouse game a little bit, where sometimes deals get stretched out because they want to make sure you're on plan.
Yeah. Well, and then, so last piece I want to talk about is, because this was unsolicited, and I'm sure going into November of last year, you were kind of had a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, you were looking at the long term for where you were going to go. And now you've got this opportunity. Obviously you're still working at the company, you're still running things, but now the future is a little different. What have you been thinking about, Cale, in terms of, are there other problems out there that you're just itching to fix? Do you feel like, maybe I want to be on the other side and be an investor in places? What have you been personally been exploring? And what do you hope to explore over the next year?
Over the last 2 months, I've been enjoying just, learning the just from a structure and process standpoint, a big company mentality.
Okay.
We were small, we were scrappy, we were always focused on growth, and we put growth over everything. We put growth over cost. We put growth over everything. And this company that we're working with, or Q2, they're still focused on the same thing. They're focused on growth. They're focused on growth over cost. They want to grow 25 to 30% a year. They know that's what their model is. And it's interesting to just sit on the other side of the table and be part of that big organization now and look at how they operate and how they do things compared to how I operated and how I did things. Now,
I can imagine a big learning curve there.
Oh, totally. And, when the ClickSWITCH started, I didn't have an MBA. I didn't have any executive leadership, any of that. It was just scrappiness. And it was just like, you got to realize everybody's motivated by different things, whether it's money, title, recognition, all that stuff. And you got to figure out how just to constantly motivate people. I'm kind of enjoying now, sitting on the other and seeing, like, even though they're a big company, it's still the same challenges. They have
how are they making decisions? Yeah.
How are we going to strategize? How are we going to figure out digital messaging? How are we going to take Q2 to the next level from a big company standpoint? And it was the same thing. Like, if I was focused on 100% growth year over year, they're still focused on 30%. And it's a little different, but it's still the same. So at the moment, I'm enjoying working at Q2 and learning a lot. Their executive team's really great, and they're teaching me a lot of, just big company ideas and thinking. And I think it's overall, it's going to help me be more well-rounded as an individual moving forward.
That's a fantastic opportunity. Yeah, I could totally see you being a sponge and just absorbing all of that because, again, where I think, I think that's something founders don't think about on the other side of, we're racing towards growth and acquisition in some cases, right? And what's the other side going to look like? And what if all the pieces come together and it happens? Where are you going to grow now? And it sounds like, the acquisition of the company itself isn't just the growth. It's now being a part of this bigger organization, this bigger machine. And I think that's a really cool opportunity. So, congratulations, man. You deserve all the success. You've worked your ass off for a long time, and you deserve this big W because I think it's fantastic. You've got an amazing team over at ClickSWITCH. I love everybody I've met over there. I think one of your strong suits, Cale, is you've just been a great team builder. You can recognize talent very quickly, and I feel like over the years you've really made some great hires. And hopefully this Q2 keeps them all happy and keeps them all there and busy.
I know we are focused on retention right now, trying to retain all of our employees, and we've been quite successful at that so far. And everybody keeps asking what's next, and I'm like, I just don't want to worry about payroll for a couple months, and then we'll figure out making payroll and raising money. And doing
I don't want to have to worry about payroll and invoicing people for a while.
Yeah. Collections, who's not paying you.
Right. Yeah. Right. All the fun stuff of owning a business, right?
And you guys are going through it at Foundry.
Yes.
It's been it was 7 years of heartache and stress, but you look back on it, it was the most, fulfilling 7 years I think I'll ever have
100%
in my life. And when you're in that moment, you don't realize it. Right. And now I'm reflecting on it and I'm like, man, that was really cool. I got to work with some of my best friends. I met a ton of good people across the world. And it was just like, it was literally the time of my life. And so, I would love to do something again, but at the moment it's like, I need to take a breath.
Well, and that's the thing is like, I think that's great because you all this experience you're having as part of this other organization will just set you up even more so and more experienced in whatever you choose to do in the future. So I think that's really smart instead of going back to school, like you said, for an MBA, you can just be a part of this company and,
and education isn't cheap,
no.
Either way, whether you're getting your MBA or you're getting your butt kicked on a contract, you learn and you keep going. Which way do you want to choose?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, Cale, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know you're really busy, obviously, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I think there's so many people out there that are going to be in your situation someday, and having you have the ability and the wherewithal to be so transparent about that, I think is fantastic. And thank you so much for not only contributing what you have to today's show, but thank you for all you've contributed just to the local Minnesota seed and the jobs you've created. I think it's just fantastic, and I'm excited to see what you do next. I plan to have you back on the show. We'll promote that too.
I'd love that. No, I appreciate it. This is my third time on your show. Hopefully we get a little better every time.
Oh, it's great. It's fantastic. We could do like a 24-hour thing. Not that anybody would want that, but I could do it. I would get enjoyment out of it. So.
Well, great.
Cool. Well, thanks, Cale. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining me on the show with Cale. Isn't he amazing? It's just such a fantastic story. If you ever get the chance, make sure you go up and shake Cale's hand and tell him congratulations, because he really deserves it. He's worked hard, and he's in a great place, and it's well deserved. So, like I mentioned, we are hiring at Foundry. Don't forget, because we're hiring, we're growing. A lot, and we need you you come and join us. I think it'd be great. So make sure you have hit the subscribe and hit the like button, because we've got more show this week. We're going to be talking a little bit more about product management, and I would love to have you and your comments and questions join us for that. So that's all I got today. Thank you for taking the time out of your important and busy day. Go out and enjoy the weather, and we'll see you next time.